Beneath the vast skies of Olympus, thunder rolls and clouds bow, ruled by one supreme will, Zeus, king of the gods and wielder of lightning. His voice shapes destiny. His power binds both mortals and immortals, and his presence echoes in every storm, every sacred oath, every law that upholds the world. Yet, in the quiet shadows of this greatness, another force lingers, unseen but unyielding, a goddess not of might, but of balance and inevitability. Her name is Nemesis, keeper of measure, the hand of justice, restoring harmony whenever arrogance rises beyond its limits, in gods or mortals alike. She is not feared for cruelty, but for certainty, for none can outrun her grasp, not kings, not heroes, not even the divine ruler of Olympus himself. This tale is not of battlefields or violence, but of power and restraint, of pride and the timeless reckoning that always follows excess. For even Zeus, crowned in authority, could never escape the watchful gaze of Nemesis, whose presence ensured balance within heaven and earth. In the eternal dance of Olympus, authority and retribution walk together, inseparable, reminding us that no power is beyond balance. High upon the peak of Mount Olympus, where air shimmered with divinity, stood the golden palace of the gods, glowing in sunlight and embraced by drifting clouds. Within its marble halls and endless feasts, Zeus reigned supreme, king of gods and master of the heavens, his presence a constant force of order and authority. His throne was not only a seat of power, but a symbol of balance between heaven and earth, where thunder and lightning marked his will across sky and land. Mortals revered him with awe and fear, for they felt his hand in every storm and every calm, while even gods bowed to the thunderous weight of his word. Zeus's reign was born from struggle, forged in battles against titans and forces of chaos. Each triumph, not just victory, but the creation of order itself. He was more than the god of storms. He guarded oaths, honored justice, and watched hospitality, ensuring kindness was cherished and cruelty never escaped divine notice. Every king who swore by Zeus carried the weight of eternity in his words, and every prayer, from great temples to lonely fields, rose to his throne. Yet the burden of rule was heavy, for power is never without challenge, and ambition among mortals and gods alike often tested the limits of Olympus itself. Heroes dreamed of rivaling divinity. Kings reached beyond their place, and pride burned quietly among the immortals, waiting for the moment to rise against measure. Zeus's choices were decisive, his authority unmatched, but whispers asked if his rule was always just, for even the greatest power may falter in balance. Here, Nemesis found her place, unseen yet unyielding, the silent force reminding Zeus that all power must remain measured. No matter how high the throne, she was the certainty that arrogance could not endure, the stillness after the storm, the quiet correction to restore harmony where excess had begun. Not an enemy, not a rival. Nemesis was the eternal balance, the unseen truth that even the king of gods was never above justice. Zeus thundered across heaven, his reign magnificent, yet always under the patient gaze of Nemesis, who ensured that power never escaped its boundaries. In the golden halls of Olympus, Zeus may have been king, but Nemesis was balance. And without balance, even the strongest throne must one day fall. In ancient Greece, power was never endless, for every force carried within it the seed of its opposite, and balance was the true rhythm of existence. The sun brought warmth and growth, but if it lingered too long, fields cracked and withered, reminding mortals that even light could become a burden. Rain refreshed the earth and filled rivers, yet too much water drowned villages, destroyed homes, and turned blessings into sorrow, balance always demanded its return. The sea offered food and trade, but storms could rise suddenly, sinking ships and scattering lives, showing that even the generous ocean had its limits. Balance was not only about nature, it guided human life too. For bravery without measure became arrogance, and kings who sought too much power lost their thrones. Even beauty, when worshipped beyond reason, led to ruin. For envy and obsession followed excess like shadows that no one could outrun or escape. And at the center of this truth stood Nemesis, not cruel, not vengeful, but the goddess of balance, the one who restored harmony when the scales tipped. She embodied time's Sophrosine asterisk, the spirit of moderation, reminding all that no one mortal or divine could rise beyond the eternal law of measure. Nemesis did not roar like Ares or thunder like Zeus. Her justice was silent, inevitable, a whisper that followed pride until it collapsed on its own weight. A warrior who forgot humility would fall. A king who claimed too much would be humbled, for her hand never acted in malice but always in necessity. The Greeks lived with this truth, building temples to honor power, yet never forgetting its limits, celebrating joy but balancing it with rituals of reflection. Their philosophers spoke of the golden path between extremes, teaching that excess in any form was the enemy of wisdom and the seed of downfall. Their myths echoed the same lesson, for Achilles, glorious in battle, was undone by pride, while Narcissus, blinded by beauty, wasted away at his reflection. Even gods could not escape her. For Nemesis reminded Olympus itself that unchecked authority invited imbalance, and even Zeus was bound by her law. She was both feared and respected, feared for the losses she brought, but respected for her justice, for she ensured the world never strayed too far. Nemesis was the guardian of harmony, the voice that whispered after triumph, the shadow after excess, reminding all that nothing escapes balance forever. In Greek mythology, many gods announced themselves with brilliance and spectacle, filling the world with sound, light, and power. Zeus thundered across the skies, Poseidon stirred the seas with his trident, and Apollo filled the air with light and song. Athena carried the flame of wisdom into battle, her presence unmistakable in the roar of war and the clash of minds. But Nemesis was different. Unlike the rest, she did not shout, she did not blaze, and she did not demand attention. She lingered in the quiet corners of life, unseen yet undeniable, felt rather than witnessed, feared rather than adored. Unlike other deities, she was not worshipped with grand festivals or temples, but through whispers, prayers, and uneasy reverence. Nemesis did not crave devotion. She existed to remind mortals and gods alike of one truth: balance could not be escaped. Her very name meant to give what is due, carrying a weight that few dared to forget or ignore. She was the one who ensured that arrogance did not endure, and that excess was always answered by consequence. Nemesis never punished for cruelty's sake. Her role was to restore measure, to return order where it had been broken. Mortals and gods alike feared her, for when anyone strayed too far from harmony, Nemesis returned them to their place. Unlike Ares, who reveled in blood, or Hera, who pursued vengeance through fury, Nemesis was calm and impartial. She was not guided by anger or passion. She was law made flesh, the steady rhythm of the cosmos personified. No one escaped her gaze, not kings on their thrones, not heroes in glory, not even the rulers of Olympus. In art, Nemesis held scales, a wheel, or sometimes a sword, each symbol a reminder of balance and justice. The wheel turned ceaselessly, reflecting the shifting fortunes of mortals, while the sword warned of justice when ignored. Yet her greatest power was not in objects. but in her invisible presence, subtle yet always certain and inescapable. Mortals described her as a shadow, unseen but heavy, a force that lingered when pride began to grow too high. A warrior who boasted too loudly after victory might feel her silent gaze weighing on his shoulders. A queen too proud of her beauty might see her reflection fade, her radiance quietly slipping away without reason. A king, demanding too much from his people, might find his empire shaken, not by war, but by Nemesis herself. To the Greeks, Nemesis was tied to hubris, the dangerous pride that sought to rise higher than the gods allowed. Hubris was more than confidence, it was arrogance, a crossing of sacred limits, and Nemesis always answered it. Just as dark clouds promise rain, hubris promised downfall, and Nemesis was the storm's breath pulling the proud to earth. Her presence was not only among mortals, even the gods themselves were bound by her balance. Zeus enforced order with thunder and might, but Nemesis ensured that order never strayed into unchecked domination. She existed as the eternal counterweight, a force beyond choice, the foundation of balance across all existence. Nemesis did not destroy for pleasure. She preserved harmony, reminding all that no power was absolute forever. Unlike gods who sought spectacle, Nemesis needed no crown, no army, no temple of grandeur to assert herself. Her steps were invisible, her justice certain, her presence woven quietly into myths, warnings, and lessons of life. When poets wrote of downfall after triumph, Nemesis was in their verse, whispering between the lines of tragedy. When philosophers taught moderation, her shadow was there, steady and guiding, a silent truth behind every word. She was feared, yes, but also respected, for those who acknowledged her limits often walked with wisdom. The wise knew she was not cruel. She was inevitable, the reminder that excess always carried a price. Part 3 of this tale is not about thunder or war, but about inevitability and silence. It is about a goddess who needed no voice to be heard, no spectacle to be feared, no crown to be obeyed. Nemesis was quiet, yet eternal, her silence carrying the greatest power of all, the certainty of balance restored. Zeus ruled Olympus with thunder in his hand and command in his voice, feared by mortals and respected by gods. He had defeated the Titans and shaped the order of the cosmos, embodying what many believed was ultimate power. Yet power in Greek thought was never absolute, for even Zeus knew the threads of destiny could not be cut. His authority rested not only on thunder, but on harmony within Olympus, where whispers of fate always lingered. Zeus shaped victories for kings, sent storms to warriors, and guided mortals, but his hand sometimes pressed too heavily. Nemesis, quiet and watchful, never bowed to thunder, for she served a law greater than Zeus, the law of balance. Whenever Zeus tipped the scale too far, Nemesis stirred, not in anger, but in necessity, restoring measure where it faltered. Mortals often praised Zeus beyond reason, offering festivals and sacrifices that risked forgetting moderation's sacred place. When devotion to Zeus grew unchecked, Nemesis appeared silently, reminding mortals that worship itself required balance. Zeus, too, sometimes tested harmony, demanding obedience rather than respect, his storms heavy with command. Each time his rule grew too harsh, Nemesis whispered from the shadows, warning that pride invited downfall. Zeus feared the day Nemesis might turn her gaze fully upon him, for her power was inevitability itself. Thunder could shatter mountains, but Nemesis was the erosion of time, the certainty that no peak stood forever. Poets spoke of their tension as balance, not rivalry, two forces bound together in the rhythm of existence. Zeus enforced authority through thunder, while Nemesis enforced limits, ensuring neither fear nor chaos swallowed the world. Mortals understood this lesson well, for kings rose by Zeus's favor but fell when Nemesis answered arrogance. A warrior's triumph might shine with divine strength, but if he boasted too loudly, Nemesis waited in silence. Even queens of beauty learned the truth, for grace turned to pride was soon followed by Nemesis's quiet hand. Zeus and Nemesis became inseparable in myth, thunder and silence, power and restraint, rise and consequence. Together, they shaped the rhythm of the cosmos, not as enemies, but as balance embodied in divine form. To the Greeks, their story was a mirror of life, of rulers, heroes, and empires that forgot humility. Nemesis was not Zeus's rival, but his counterweight, preventing even the king of gods from becoming undone. After thunder faded and the skies cleared, Nemesis remained. Her presence felt in the silence that followed. She reminded mortals and gods alike that no matter how loud the storm, balance would always have the final word. For ancient Greeks, the gods were not distant myths, but living presences woven into every part of life. When seas roared, they heard Poseidon's anger. When harvests thrived, they felt Demeter's blessing. When storms rumbled across the mountains, they knew Zeus was near, mighty and unyielding in the skies. Yet in quiet moments, when pride swelled or fortune grew too great, they felt Nemesis watching. The Greeks lived with boundaries, where every gift carried a limit and every blessing carried a warning. A strong harvest meant wealth, but greed could twist prosperity into ruin and leave fields empty. Victory in battle meant glory, but arrogance after triumph led swiftly to a warrior's downfall. Even love and beauty, celebrated in poetry and song, became dangerous if they grew without measure. Nemesis stood at the heart of this truth, unseen yet waiting, restoring harmony where it slipped away. Philosophers called it hubris, a dangerous pride that blinded mortals and pushed them past their rightful place. Hubris was not mere arrogance. It was an offense against balance, the sacred rhythm of the cosmos. When hubris appeared, Nemesis followed, calm but inevitable, answering excess with measured consequence. Stories spread across Greece that carried her warning, whispered by poets, singers, and wandering storytellers. A hunter boasted that not even the gods could rival his skill, but his bow shattered in shame. A queen declared her beauty surpassed the goddesses, but her kingdom fell, her radiance dimmed to shadow. These tales spoke not of blood or gore, but of downfall, quiet and certain, shaped by Nemesis's hand. For mortals, she was fear and teacher alike, guiding them to humility and respect for measure. Farmers with abundant crops left humble offerings at her shrines, whispering gratitude mixed with caution. Warriors returned from victory and spoke her name softly, fearing a boast might draw her gaze. Even poets, living on praise, warned in verse that Nemesis listened, ever watchful and ever near. Her presence was subtle yet everywhere, woven into fortune, silence, and the turning of time itself. A ship too heavy with treasure might sink, reminding sailors of greed's quiet but powerful danger. A wealthy man who hoarded riches might find himself heirless, his fortune dissolving into strangers' hands. A king who demanded worship as a god might watch his people rise against him in fury. These events were not seen as punishment, but as balance, the world correcting itself under Nemesis's gaze. Her shrines were small, not grand like Zeus or Athena's, yet her altars stood across the land. Mortals left simple offerings, praying not for victory or riches, but for balance and moderation. They asked for wisdom to know when enough was enough, and strength to resist the pull of excess. Poets described her justice as a wheel that never rested, turning, bringing high things back to earth. Her hand was unseen, but her presence was inescapable, quiet yet certain as the passing of time. Unlike thunder or flame, she did not strike suddenly, but worked slowly until pride collapsed on itself. The Greeks found wisdom in this truth, learning that moderation was the path to harmony with gods. To celebrate joy without losing humility was to honor Nemesis, protector of balance across mortal lives. She was feared, yes, but respected too, for even Zeus himself could not deny her presence. In every city, in every village, she lingered, in silence after feasts, in pauses before boasts. A king hesitating before demanding too much, a warrior humbling his pride there Nemesis was felt. She was not destruction, but reflection, not cruelty, but certainty, the quiet reminder of the golden path. In the myths of ancient Greece, silence often carried as much meaning as thunder rolling across the sky. And in one such silence, the paths of Zeus and Nemesis are said to have crossed. Zeus ruled with thunderbolts and law, a figure of immense authority, feared and revered across heaven and earth. Yet even Zeus, mighty as he was, knew some forces could not be commanded by strength alone. Nemesis, the goddess of balance, walked softly, yet her presence shaped mortal lives with quiet certainty. She appeared where pride grew too great, where fortune became heavy, where the scales tipped too far. One tale tells us Zeus sought her, not as an enemy, but as a partner in thought. He had seen kings grow arrogant, warriors forget humility, and mortals overstep their fragile limits. Zeus could summon storms to punish and frighten, but thunder could not teach lasting wisdom. He realized what Nemesis carried was different, the lesson of restraint, delivered without fire or fury. So, on a still evening atop Olympus, Zeus waited, the skies calm, the air heavy with expectation. Nemesis came in silence, her gaze steady, her steps light, radiating the certainty of justice. Zeus greeted her as an equal, a rare honor, and asked how balance might be preserved. Nemesis answered with clarity. Pride collapses not by force, but under the weight of its own excess. Her words struck Zeus more deeply than thunder ever could, revealing truths beyond his dominion. In that moment, a quiet harmony formed power and balance, thunder and consequence side by side. Zeus stood for authority and order, Nemesis for measure and retribution, each incomplete without the other. Together, they reminded mortals, power must be respected, but balance must never be ignored. It was not an alliance of chains, but a recognition, a shared truth between two divine forces. Zeus would rule with strength, but Nemesis would ensure excess never outweighed harmony. The Greeks who heard this tale saw wisdom even Zeus could not deny, balance above all else. Grand offerings honored Zeus, prayers begged his favor. Yet Nemesis received whispers for moderation. The tale was retold, not as thunder or war, but as conversation, soft yet eternal in weight. It warned that even authority must bow to measure, even gods must heed the voice of balance. Zeus learned that true rule required more than force, it required humility and listening. Nemesis knew her presence was affirmed, that even the greatest god respected her work. Poets carried this story through Greece, a quiet reminder woven into song and verse. It told that the world itself rested on a fragile equilibrium, sustained by both might and restraint. No storm shook Olympus in this tale, no battle unfolded, yet the lesson endured. Zeus and Nemesis stood as two truths, shaping both destiny and order with divine weight. And in the space between them, mortals lived, walking the line between ambition and humility. Every triumph was shadowed by Nemesis's gaze, Every command strengthened by Zeus's thunder. The image remains powerful. The king of the gods and the goddess of balance, side by side. Strength without measure crumbles. Measure without strength fades. But together they form harmony. And harmony, above all, is the foundation of both mortal life and divine order. In ancient Greece, myths were more than stories. They were teachers, shaping how people lived and saw the world. The tale of Zeus and Nemesis was whispered in firesides and marketplaces, guiding mortals through pride and fortune. It taught that power, wealth, and beauty were gifts, but gifts that carried heavy weight and unseen limits. The Greeks believed no blessing came without consequence, for the gods tied strings to every fortune. Consider Croesus, the wealthy king of Lydia, remembered in Greek tales as a warning from Nemesis. Croesus believed his riches made him untouchable, that gold and fortune would never abandon his throne. The Oracle of Delphi warned him, if he waged war, a great empire would be destroyed. Blinded by pride, Croesus assumed victory was his destiny, but Nemesis had marked his path otherwise. The empire that fell was his own, a balance restored through consequence, not cruelty or wrath. Such stories spread across Greece, teaching that Nemesis was inevitable. Excess always tipped back into loss. A farmer who bragged of endless harvests might find his field struck barren by sudden drought. A warrior who returned with too much pride might soon fall to misfortune in the next battle. The lesson was simple but eternal. Humility was the shield, arrogance the weakness that doomed mortals. While Zeus embodied law and divine justice, Nemesis offered restraint, the quiet keeper of harmony. Her presence lived in daily rituals, in libations poured to remind feasts not to turn into excess. At festivals, joy was tempered with whispers. Celebrate, but do not draw Nemesis's watchful eye. Parents told children of heroes undone by pride, their strength and beauty destroyed from within. Poets and tragedians carried Nemesis to the stage, where kings fell not to war, but to hubris. The audience wept as they saw downfall unfold, knowing it was Nemesis's truth, not mere fate. Philosophers too wrote of her, speaking of balance as life's guiding law, the golden middle path. They warned that excess, whether too much or too little, always bent toward collapse in the end. Nemesis ensured that balance endured, whether through quiet loss, reversed fortune, or humbled pride. The ordinary Greek did not need to see Nemesis appear. Her hand was felt in outcomes. A merchant, cheating others too often, might suddenly lose all wealth. His fortune dissolved overnight. A noble craving endless praise might find his allies gone when he stood alone in need. These were not accidents, they said, but Nemesis's unseen work, restoring harmony to mortal affairs. She did not dwell in mighty temples, but in whispers, respected, feared, and never ignored. Her prayers were humble, not for riches or victory, but for wisdom, to know when to stop. Mortals asked her to guide their hearts, to whisper when enough was enough, when pride was near. The story of Zeus and Nemesis gave her truth more weight. Even the king of gods listened. If Zeus himself acknowledged her, what mortal dared to live as though balance did not exist? And so her tale endured, not through war or thunder, but through quiet lessons across generations. Every triumph carried a shadow. Every gift needed humility. Every joy demanded measure to last. Nemesis lived not in violence, but in reflection. A quiet reminder that balance rules all things. Among the myths of Greece, the tales of mortals who defied balance stood as lasting mirrors of pride. Narcissus was a youth of unmatched beauty, admired by many, yet he saw only himself. Nemesis watching his vanity grow, guided him to a pool where his reflection stole his heart. Day after day, Narcissus lingered at the water's edge, unable to turn away from his own image. His beauty faded into silence, and Nemesis restored balance not with cruelty, but with quiet truth. Another tale told of Erysichthon, a king who cut a sacred tree of Demeter out of pride. His arrogance denied reverence to the gods, and Nemesis marked his act as imbalance against nature. Hunger consumed him, an endless void no feast could fill, stripping him of wealth, power, and home. Through such stories, Nemesis became more than myth. She was the invisible boundary, guarding harmony. She acted not from spite, but from necessity, keeping mortals from drowning in pride, greed, or vanity. Kings feared her unseen hand, knowing no temple or offering could sway her quiet sense of measure. Her worship lived in humility, a merchant asking when enough was enough, a warrior seeking restraint. Philosophers echoed her wisdom, teaching that virtue lived in moderation, never in extremes of excess. The Greeks knew her presence in every fall of pride, every sudden turn of fortune, every downfall. Zeus himself respected her, for even his throne needed Nemesis to temper power with quiet restraint. Without her balance, excess would shatter the world, and even Olympus could not stand unshaken. Through Narcissus and Erysichthon, the Greeks saw not cruelty, but Nemesis guiding the world to harmony. Her name lived in songs, stories, and warnings, whispered through generations as the voice of measure. As long as mortals dreamed of glory, Nemesis would follow, steadying the scales with unseen hands. Nemesis did not guide mortals alone. Her gaze reached even into the shining halls of Olympus. Though gods were eternal, their actions carried weight, shaping the fates of both mortals and earth. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, once tested her power by bending love far beyond what was natural. The result was chaos, for forced love turned bitter, and Nemesis reminded her that beauty has limits. Apollo, proud of music and prophecy, boasted none could rival his skill, his pride swelling unchecked. When mortals challenged him, his anger grew, but Nemesis shadowed him with lessons in moderation. Even Zeus, king of gods, faced her presence when pride pushed him toward desire and overreach. Nemesis tempered consequence, reminding Olympus that even the thunderer must bow to balance. What set her apart was impartiality. Nemesis sought no revenge, no favor, only the law of measure. Where Ares loved war and Hera sought control, Nemesis pursued harmony, making her feared yet revered. If gods themselves could not escape her, mortals had no hope of defying her unseen hand. In Athenian theaters, Nemesis lived in tragedy, unspoken but present in downfall and whispered by chorus. Kings blinded by ambition, heroes ruined by pride, each story carried her shadow of consequence. She was not worshipped in golden temples, but in humble acts of moderation and restraint. A farmer sharing grain, a leader ruling fairly, these honored her more than costly sacrifice. Nemesis was not destroyer of joy, but protector of it, ensuring triumphs endured through humility. Her reach stretched from mortal fields to Olympus thrones, reminding all that balance rules above all. She was the quiet law of harmony, steadying the cosmos when pride threatened to tear it apart. For gods and mortals alike, Nemesis was the mirror of truth where measure was the greatest law. The stories of Zeus and Nemesis lived on through centuries, carried in voices of poets, lessons of philosophers, and rituals of ordinary people. Nemesis was more than a goddess. She was the rhythm of life, reminding all that fortune's crest is always followed by restraint's quiet pull. Sailors whispered her name before setting sail, asking not only for favorable winds, but for humility to face storms waiting beyond the horizon. Farmers honored her in their harvests, knowing abundance one season could turn into scarcity the next if pride tempted them to forget humility. Kings feared her most of all, for her hand toppled thrones as easily as it humbled peasants, reminding them that crowns were never beyond balance. When Athens shined in glory, Nemesis was its quiet guardian. Philosophers and tragedians spoke of heroes undone by pride, victories poisoned by arrogance. They warned that harmony would shatter if balance was ignored, and the higher a city soared, the more it risked falling into Nemesis's shadow. As Rome rose and Greece declined, her lesson remained. Romans spoke of her under new names, yet her spirit still guided the turning of fortune's wheel. Nemesis was timeless. Borders and languages could not bind her, for she was the eternal law that reminded the world power unchecked always collapses. Even as gods gave way to new faiths, her essence lingered. In every culture, people carried her truth, calling it fate, karma, justice, or divine order. Her story endured not through fear but recognition. Listeners saw themselves in her lessons, knowing temptation, pride, and the sudden shift of fortune. To hear Nemesis was to be reminded of life's fragile balance, the invisible thread stretched beneath every step of mortals and rulers alike. Even today her voice lingers, though her name may not be spoken. Collapse, downfall, or ruin still echo with her timeless law of balance. Zeus thundered as a symbol of authority, but Nemesis endured as the counterweight. Without her, fortune would shatter the world in its extremes. Together, they were not just myth, but truth, weaving law into existence itself, ensuring power never escaped the eternal circle of measure. The Greeks ended their tales with humility, reminding all that no life, mortal or divine, could walk free from Nemesis's steady gaze. In her, people found both fear and comfort. Fear that pride would summon her, comfort that harmony would always be restored in time. The story of Zeus and Nemesis is not only myth, it is a truth that crosses centuries, reminding us balance is eternal and unbroken. We live, we rise, we fall, yet Nemesis steadies the scales. She is the quiet law, the eternal presence, the keeper of harmony.